Reason Podcast does not believe in curses or hexes and is unconcerned with what offends you. We do not believe that words have the power to compel spirits or demons to affect your life in any way. If you do, well, there is a reason why the explicit tag is there.
Listening to Reason Podcast. Reason. To think, understand, and form judgments by a process of logic.
Hello, and welcome to Reason. Today is Sunday, February 3rd, and this episode is entitled, February is a stupid month, a stupid name, and has an extra R, a silent R. Who the hell ever heard of a silent R? Thank you, that is all. Oh, also, there's something about the Super Bowl or something, I'm reasonably certain. I am Joshua Billingsley, along with Paul Whitmire.
How you doing?
And David Ward.
Good evening.
And this podcast is coming to you live from sunny Buffalo, New York. Reason Podcast is a weekly discussion of events, both current and historical, from a skeptical, a rational, and a non-theological perspective. Reason Podcast is brought to you by the Offensive Atheists and the atheist community of Buffalo and Western New York. For further information, please visit our blog and website at wnyatheist.org or email us at reason@wnyatheist.org.
All right, so Susanna Mendaro, appellant, versus the World Bank, also known as the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, is a court case that actually happened a fair amount of time ago, back in 1983, but we're going to discuss it anyway, and we're going to pretend that it's current and practical, like we do with everything.
Everything is current and practical.
Yes.
The Cold War is going on if we're talking about the Cold War. That's what I always say.
Okay, so the reason why I chose this court case is because it is from the United States Court of Appeals, District of Columbia Circuit, one of the highest courts that any sort of suit against the World Bank has ever gotten to.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why there haven't been a whole lot of court cases involving suing the World Bank is because apparently you can't sue the World Bank.
And that is where things get interesting.
Yes. So, to quote from the decision, this appeal requires us to decide whether the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development may be sued in the United States courts by employees of the bank seeking redress of employment-related grievances. And this was, again, this is an appeal, hence the word appellant. The original case was dismissed because the original court said you cannot sue the World Bank. And the reason why you cannot sue the World Bank is something that Josh and I are going to get into a little bit here.
I'm going to have a little bit of extra information a little bit toward the end, but we're going to touch on it, I think.
Good deal. The reason why you can't sue the World Bank is because the World Bank is a, quote, international organization, end quote, which means that they, under the International Organizations Immunities Act, operate pretty much like they have diplomatic immunity across the board.
It's called sovereignty. They act as a specific nation, and you can't expect Great Britain to be held to American law. And so they have, their freedom from prosecution that way.
Right. And so what happened in this particular case is Susanna Mendaro, an Argentine citizen, was hired as a researcher by the World Bank in 1977. She claimed that during her term of employment, she was the victim of a pattern of sexual harassment and discrimination by other bank employees over many, many years. And when she was passed over for promotion after promotion and never really went anywhere with her job, she eventually decided, hey, it'd be a good idea. I'll get one of them lawyer-type people.
Oh.
And I'll do the suing.
Well, that does seem like a fine plan. That's always a good idea in my book.
Unfortunately, in this case, it didn't work out quite to her favor because of this immunity of international organizations. So the immunity, the law that's written that governs all of this requires that the organization remain independent from the intranational policies of its individual members. Consequently, the charters of many international financial institutions contain express provisions designed to guarantee the neutral operation of the organization despite the political policies of the member nations or the individual backgrounds of the organization's officers. Now, Josh and I were discussing this earlier, and we have a little bit of a different opinion on it, but I don't think we're too far
not too far apart. I think
in the whole deal. It seems to me that what this is saying is if you have an international organization, an organization that has many offices, say an office in America, an office in France, an office in England,
Bangladesh,
that you can't hold that organization through international treaty. You can't hold that organization to say that the office in Bangladesh, for example, has to follow all the laws of
the Lake Titicaca.
Right, of Lake Titicaca, of which their laws are myriad and well known throughout the world community.
Oh, yes.
Lake Titicaca.
I really just want to say it for no good reason. Just want to say Lake Titicaca.
I'm sure you did, and it makes me wonder if there will ever be a pussy riot in Lake Titicaca.
Let's hope so.
All right. So that was the inception of this international immunity that was set up for international organizations. But what it means in this case is that, to get her name right, Susanna Mendaro has absolutely no recourse to sue her employers for creating a hostile work environment and for making it so that she couldn't advance in her job. And there's no way she can sue or do anything. I mean, I suppose possibly, although I'm not as well versed in international law, but perhaps she could sue. Is there like a no? There's no one.
Not for that. There's not. The United Nations, the World Court does not do that because the World Court doesn't deal with internal things. Her only mode of redressing her the only redress she has is going to be within the World Bank.
And what's interesting is that the World Bank or any international organization has the option to waive their immunity, which they did not do. Why not? Well, because...
Would you?
It would probably mean them losing the case and paying out money.
Yes.
Which the World Bank probably is not very big on, as I'm sure Josh is going to address that as we go on through the show. So the Act confers immunity, quote, except to the extent that such organizations expressly waive their immunity for the purposes of any proceedings or by the terms of any contract. Now, basically what they're saying there is they can do whatever the fuck they want.
Well, as long as it doesn't violate the contract.
Right.
So if there's a clause in the contract that says you cannot be sexually harassed, aha! Now you've got something. But if there's not, then you've got nothing.
So there's a fair amount here about discussing how the World Bank functions and what its actual purpose is, which I know we're going to get into as we get into the rest of the show here. But basically, this case is an example of the reason why I wanted to talk about this case is because the World Bank is one of a couple of organizations, and Josh and I are going to really try very hard this week to stay away from sounding like conspiracy theorist whack jobs.
Not that far. Just kind of far. A little far, but not that far.
Well, we'll have David's good Christian values to rein us back in.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Thank you, David.
That always helps.
You're welcome. That's why I'm here.
But the World Bank is an incredibly powerful organization. I think this case court highlights that by highlighting the fact that, like, oh, you know the people you work for, if they do something grievously wrong to you, you can't even sue them. Why? Because they're a super powerful international organization.
And one of the reasons this is actually pretty important is just to parallel it with the recent rape charge that Mr. Strauss-Kahn, who was the head of the World Bank at the time, that he did, where he may have probably, kind of looks like he really did, rape a housekeeper in a hotel, attempted rape, I should say. He was taken under local charges and was arrested and was arraigned, and he was acting as an independent agent at that time, not as a representative of the World Bank, which is why it's a different thing. And I know this has been more recent news from 2011,
right?
But you could not sue the World Bank for his conduct because he was only in town as an agent of the World Bank, but he was on his own time. Had he done this while he was working for the World Bank, like in his office, then you could sue the World Bank, except you couldn't sue the World Bank.
Right.
So you might even be able to go after criminal prosecution against him again, but you couldn't sue the deep pockets for money. And that's the real big difference here, is that If the I don't know, the UPS guy comes to your house with a package and rapes you, you could sue UPS. If the World Bank guy comes to your house with a clipboard and needs you to sign something and rapes you, you cannot sue the World Bank.
Yeah, and that's where this whole international immunity gets really fuzzy because it's not very specific. It covers all the employees of the World Bank. It covers all of the buildings of the World Bank, and there's a really fuzzy line in terms of, well, when does it stop being some guy who works for the World Bank who, in his off time, rapes and pillages, and then basically is, no, he's an employee of the World Bank. And this is important because if you sue an individual, as most of the people who work in law who know, the individuals tend not to have money, tend to have plenty of ways to squirrel away money and get out of paying large court settlements. Mm-hmm. But if you sue a corporation...
They've got money.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of money.
And that is why you sue McDonald's when the coffee burns you and not
the person that made the coffee?
Right, the person behind the counter, because McDonald's is the one who actually is going to wind up paying.
Additionally, they're acting at that point as an agent of McDonald's.
Yes.
Much the same way that the sexual harassment was acting in the workplace, therefore it was the workplace who you sue, not Bob, your manager.
Right. But in this case, poor Susanna Mendaro had no recourse for the perceived injustices that she experienced. Now, what's interesting is there is never, ever going to be any discussion about whether or not the environment that she worked in was actually sexually biased, whether or not she was actually passed up for promotion and things like that, because that never came up in the two court cases. And first the original case and then this Court of Appeals case. It always just stopped on a dime at the issue of, well, can you sue the World Bank? And the answer is no. You cannot sue the World Bank. So just to read the conclusion of the paper here, let's kind of wrap this up. The conclusion is, we are persuaded that the members of the World Bank only intended to abrogate the bank's immunity to actions relating to its external activities and contracts, and not the internal administration of its civil servants. Accordingly, the judgment of the district court is affirmed. So, which goes, again, back to Josh and I saying they can do pretty much whatever the fuck they want.
Indeed. And I guess that with great power comes great immunity.
Yes.
Is the phrase that it should go.
Unless there's like Mel Gibson and Danny Glover and they do the lethal weapon thing where they shoot him at the end and say,
diplomatic immunity.
It's revoked, but that doesn't really happen.
No, it doesn't. And I'm not sure you're allowed to have Kruger ants.
And then mostly diplomatic immunity seems to just get diplomats out of parking tickets. So,
well, generally diplomats are usually pretty good about not, raping people in hotel rooms for the most part.
For the most part.
You can get a lot of really easy prostitutes if you're a diplomat.
Every once and again there's a bad apple, though.
Yeah, bad apple. Spoils the bunch. Doesn't go for a prostitute. Goes to rape somebody in a hotel room. Strauss-Kahn.
All right.
Moving on.
Okay, so the topic this week is the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. We're going to be talking about that. Please give us a call with your questions, comments, concerns. The number is 424-243-9589. And there's also a chat room at blogtalkradio.com. You can go in there and check out Physics Vegan Brian, who is apparently complaining about the fact that we are interrupting him from his West Wing, which is legitimate. I understand the West Wing is important.
It's very important, but it is on Netflix. You can just hit pause.
Yes, there is a pause button. We're live, motherfucker. Woot woot. And you can tell by our incompetence.
You can indeed.
So also, you can email us at reason@wnyatheist.org. Okay, so the first thing we wanted to address this week is, something that we don't normally do. We don't usually bring this up, but we've had a rash recently of some interesting emails.
Some fun stuff that we've gotten recently, and it's nice that, please keep them coming. We love the emails, reason@wnyatheist.org.
And some of them are interesting, though. And so we've decided to institute one of these every once and again, depending on how interesting the responses we get are, a new section we like to entitle, Insane Shit That People Email Us.
Yes, indeed.
So, we got a comment. It was actually on our Facebook page, which you can check out, but it was a note from a Sean. I'm not going to read his whole name out of respect and privacy, even though he apparently thinks I'm an asshole.
Well, you are an asshole. He's right on that fact. He's right on that point. He hits you an arrow right to the center.
So he states, I should also note that after hearing your plea for cash on the podcast tonight, we've been asked for $1 or $2 from you guys, he would gladly donate as soon as Paul agrees never to say the words
for Kenji
fibers again. I mean ever. Josh and David, cool, just not Paul. So my problem with this is, why the fuck can't I say
Kenji fibers?
And yet you two can, to reckless abandon all you want. I don't believe I mispronounce it. I understand what they do and what their purposes are, but apparently I can't say the words
for Kenji fibers,
and that is the way it's going to be. And I would say that's fine, Sean. We're going to hold you to your promise.
So, Paul, are you going to say
for Kenji fibers?
I am not. I shall stay silent as long as the pennies keep flowing.
Oh, we like pennies and nickels even better.
Yes, yeah. Sometimes there's money that folds, but who can say? All right, so my clear response to this was, what the hell? Why can't I say the words
for Kenji fibers?
And Sean responded with a list of 10 things that he would rather hear than me saying the words
for Kenji fibers.
So number 10, Alabama Baptist talking to him about Jeebus.
Oh, no.
Harley Davidsons with cut pipes on a warm summer night.
Sons of bitches.
I'm quite familiar with that sound. Joel Osteen talking about faith.
Jesus, amen, hallelujah, and televangelism.
Joel Osteen talking about anything.
Like Jesus.
Now that's so far so good, a strange list, but we get to number 6, which I believe is quite special. That would be, apparently Sean would rather hear the sound of James Carville's orgasm.
Oh no.
Than for me to say the words
for Kenji fibers.
So apparently that is the way it's going to be. I'm not going to try and imitate. I'm not going to try and imitate James Carville's orgasm.
I'm not sure it's doable.
I think it would sound a bit scratchy. It seems
scratchy and Louisiana-ish.
Yeah. And then, and then I'm bald, and yeah, that's what he would do. But I don't hate the gays.
Yeah, I love James Carville. Oh my God, that guy's hilarious.
Number 5.
Is 5 my favorite one?
It's of a special import to you, Josh.
Yes.
Apparently, Sean would rather hear you singing than me to say the words
for Kenji fibers.
And that is only because I do not think you've done a sufficient amount of singing on the show in order
to turn him down.
Right. I think you may modify his list after we have you break into
Sweet Home Alabama.
Yeah. I would rather hear Paul say
for Kenji fibers
than Josh sing.
It's okay, David. You can say it too. All right. So, and that's fine. Number 4, Mr. Rogers whispers violent sexual threats in his ears as he sleeps.
I actually would like to hear that. That seems kind of crazy. I'm not like all the time, but that seems like that'd be an interesting thing.
He takes off his shoes. He kind of cuddles up next to you in bed, and apparently whispers violent sexual threats.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to fuck you with this shoe or something. I don't know what.
With the sweater.
Yes, with his sweater. And then the last thing any of us want is to be sodomized with a sweater.
Yes, I think that's low on my list of things to do today.
We assure you, as we repeated last week, we are all adults here.
Yes.
Okay. Joel Osteen makes another appearance, or Joel Osteen, Joel Osteen's name, which apparently I'm allowed to say.
Yes.
Even though I don't know exactly how it's pronounced. Chris Wallace.
Yeah.
And then number 1, and I am kind of totally on board with this. Number 1 is when I think I received a text message, then look down and realize that no one has texted me.
That really is kind of sad.
It's really an annoying whole thing. So, and it happens apparently frequently. I would like to just kind of conclude by noting that you did question whether or not your singing or James Carville's orgasm carried more merit. I think it's a legitimate question.
I think it is.
I think, honestly, if I had to eat a Cadbury cream egg for last Easter, I think this Easter we should have you sing James Carville's Orgasm.
I'm thinking I'm going to put the kibosh on that one right now.
No, it's not going to fly? It could be like James Carville's Orgasm, the musical.
Maybe so.
All right. Well, that is.
There's a lot of drama.
I'd buy a ticket.
That is insane shit that people email us. So we appreciate it, Sean. We hope you continue to comment and listen to the show, and we will hold up our end of the bargain as long as you hold up yours.
Paul, will you say?
For Kenji Fibers.
I will not.
All right. As long as that happens, we're good to go. We're going to be rolling in green.
If I ever have further discussion on the heart or the nerve system of the heart, it's going to be complicated. There may be some gaps and holes.
Yes.
But yes.
I look forward to that.
You look forward to gaps and holes? This is kind of how you roll?
Yes.
That's David's thing. That's what he does.
I like it when shit is confusing.
What's more exciting? It makes listening a challenge. Instead of just sitting there listening, it makes a little work for the audience. Keep them on their toes.
Yes, and that's always what we're trying to do. Is this is how we are increasing our audience's intellect by being batshit crazy and making no sense and making you all figure it out.
Exactly.
It's an exercise. Okay, so
exercise in something.
We're gonna move on to talk about some current events now. Josh.
Yes.
You have any interesting news article to share with all of us?
I do. It is from the Huffington Post, which is always a storehouse of interesting, fairly liberal. Some would say propaganda. Others would say speaking the gospel truth. Who can say? This one though is very interesting.
I agree.
I'll read the title. Ralph Shorty, Oklahoma State Senator, introduces bill banning aborted fetuses in food.
Okay.
Yes, that's the name of it, and that is the bill.
I would vote for that.
I agree.
It brings to mind a question or two.
Well, like what? I've read this, and I've actually read a couple of other reports, and I've read the bill. So what questions do you have, Paul?
So, I'll start off by asking is, aborted fetuses in my fetuses, aborted fetuses in my food. Is this something that I should have been concerned about all along?
Well, according to the FDA,
FDA.
The FDA is not aware of this particular concern. So I don't think they expected this, and I think they were taken aback a little bit and didn't know what to do.
So the FDA's response was pretty much, fucking what?
Yes, the FDA's response was, what?
Yeah. It seems like this may be an example of perhaps some unnecessary regulation.
Well, I don't know. Basically, the only thing that they could point to that had any concern was that PepsiCo did partner with a food product development company, Cenomix, to develop a new low-calorie sweetener, but the company denied using fetal tissue in its research back in April of 2011 to the Children of God for Life, who seemed to believe that they were. The Children of God for Life said, hey, we think you're using aborted fetuses in your artificial sweetener. And they said, what? Which seems to be a common response to this particular line of questioning and legislation.
That is the leg that they're standing on?
Yes. That's the only thing that they could come up with, yes.
Well, I guess, okay, I guess this is important legislation. We should be concerned about PepsiCo not using aborted fetuses to develop their new artificial sweetener.
Well, they do say that there are companies that are using embryonic stem cells to research and basically cause a chemical reaction to determine whether or not something tastes good or not. This is Ralph Shorty. As a pro-life advocate, it kind of disturbed me that we would use aborted embryos or aborted human fetuses to extract stem cells and use them for research to basically make things taste better. And that's fine, except that it doesn't seem... I'm completely in agreement with this. I'm fine with this. It does not seem to be something which is actually a concern. There seems to be nothing that we could point to that shows that this actually is occurring. I'm a little confused and flabbergasted, but this is the Oklahoma State Senate at work for the law. And by the way, just in case you're wondering, there are no co-sponsors to this bill. No one else would sign on.
Couldn't get anyone to sign on board with the batshit crazy anti-Coca-Cola fetus legislation.
Right.
So the lesson here is, if you want to make sure that some crazy-ass thing it does not end up in our food, is to start an organization and then sue a company for using this particular product in their food.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's the best way of going about it.
Yes, like human eyeballs. I don't want human eyeballs in my food. I'm going to start a corporation or start a company, an organization. Reason Podcast would like to sue the state of New York to make sure that they don't put human eyeballs in my food.
I'm pretty sure they also use human eyeballs for subway tokens.
Well, the city of New York does. City of New York. Yeah. Not the state of New York. Buffalo, we don't.
No. Don't be ridiculous. Yeah. We're the Queen City, not the eyeball subway token city.
Well, we are Nickel City.
Yes. Nickel
I
City
contain a lot of nickel, I was told by someone in the Oklahoma State Senate.
By someone in my head I just made up.
Yeah. Well, I will say that I looked to a lot of different places to get more information on this, and one of the places was Gawker.com, which is a reputable news organization, if I've ever seen one. And apparently they asked certain companies, if they use aborted fetuses in their food.
And how'd that go?
McDonald's. Ashley Yingling, Media Relations, said the answer is no. McDonald's does not use aborted human fetuses in its food.
Somebody had to write that letter.
Nestle. Hillary Green, head of R&D Communications, quote, Nestle does not use aborted human fetuses in its food products. So we're good so far.
Okay.
PepsiCo. We already know PepsiCo. I don't know. We're shaky ground here. No? PepsiCo Consumer Relations Representative Margaret Corsi writes, quote, these claims are meant to suggest that human fetal tissue is somehow used in our research. That is both inaccurate and something we would never do or even consider. It is also inaccurate to suggest that tissues or cells somehow being used as product ingredients. That's dangerous, unethical, and against the law. So she seems to believe it's already against the law.
Yeah. Did any of these letters conclude with the phrase, what are you, fucking stupid?
I don't believe so. Wendy's. Kitty Munger, Director of Communications, we'd like to correct the mention of Wendy's on Gawker's relative to the issue of human fetuses. The answer is absolutely no. Wendy's does not use aborted human fetuses in its food. Now, this is an update. Apparently, originally, Wendy's did not respond to this.
Well, I still think that they're slacking off a bit. I mean, to not get a letter directly from Wendy. What was her name, Kitty or something? I mean, I think it's just too far down the chain.
No, it's that guy. It's the guy who was an orphan. He supports all those orphanage organizations. The guy whose daughter is Wendy.
Dave. I think his name is
Dave Crockett. No, Davy Crockett.
Davy Crockett, yes.
Dave something.
Davy Crockett started Wendy's with his orphan red-haired daughter and square hamburgers.
Yes. Now, wait a second. It's not all golden roses here.
Okay.
Burger King has not responded.
That's it. Yeah.
Wait a second. General Mills, Cheerios, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, your Bisquick, your Fruit of the Loom. Yeah, no, your Fruit by the Foot. All these things.
Fruit by the Foot?
Yes, General Mills has not responded.
And Bisquick, I've brought up Bisquick before. It is a concern of mine, and now I know why.
And Kraft, for God's sake.
Well, their spray cheese goes out the window.
Has not responded.
Well, it's a damn good thing they're putting this bill through.
Exactly. Coca-Cola, not responded. My question is, what are they hiding? What don't they want us to know?
Yeah, so what are you hiding, spray cheese people? I think you're hiding cheese that sprays made of
Kraft. Are you putting human fetuses in my Teddy Grahams? Because I think that you are. And until you deny it, I'm going to continue to believe that Teddy Grahams contain human fetuses. No doubt about that.
My child eats those.
Oh, my God!
Teddy Grahams are tasty, but I certainly don't want to wind up with mad cow disease because some liberal on the whole...
Whoa. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. Mad cow disease is bovine spongiform encephalitis. That's only in cows. In humans, it's Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. Come on, man. Seriously.
Well, and
it's a serious show.
I went with mad cow because I was pretty sure that if I tried to say that name, I was going to completely fuck it up.
Creutzfeldt-Jakob?
Yes. Creutzfeldt should be the cow, broken cow brain.
Perhaps.
Bad. So, I don't want broken cow brain. And that is why I shall only eat at McDonald's.
Yes, indeed. Only eat at McDonald's and never eat Kraft.
Yes.
Because unless you want to eat aborted human fetuses,
Yeah. Well,
and then you should eat at all the companies that have not responded. That way, you're sure to get some. I'm sure at least some of them do.
Well, I haven't smoked pot in a long time. I haven't gotten the munchies in a long time, but I did have some strange cravings. I don't think that is actually going to be a concern.
No. As I understand, the pregnant women with the ice cream and pickles or whatever it is, but probably seldom aborted human fetuses.
No, it seems counterintuitive to the whole pregnancy process.
It does.
All right.
Moving on. So I'm sure you've got something equally interesting to talk about there.
Well, yeah, on a slightly more serious note, the article that I wanted to reference was from The Guardian. It is entitled, "Former Navy SEAL Sniper Chris Kyle Shot Dead at a Texas Gun Range." Now, Chris Kyle is apparently a somewhat, although I'm not familiar with him and I have not read his book, he's a somewhat famous author, having written of his tales of his 4 tours in Iraq as a sniper for the SEALs and also the nonprofit organizations he started since then to help veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, a former Navy SEAL who went on to write a best-selling book chronicling his life had been shot dead at a gun range in Texas. Police said Sunday that the body of Chris Cole was found by officers responding to an incident at the Rough Creek Lodge in Glen Rose the previous evening. Chad Littlefield, a 35-year-old friend of the war veteran and author, was also killed on the scene. So, in a statement, Sergeant Lonnie Haschel and Eddie Ray Routh, 25, of Lancaster, had been charged with 2 counts of murder in relation to the double shooting. So I want to just kind of highlight the point here that what we're talking about is not a matter of some sort of accident or incident that happened at a gun range, at a shooting range.
He was deliberately shot.
2 people shot 2 other people with weapons at a gun range where everyone had, what are they called? Guns.
Yes.
So Josh and I have kind of danced around the issue of gun control and so on and so forth. We do butt heads a little bit on it, but this does seem to quite clearly highlight the
argument that if everybody were armed, people wouldn't get shot?
Yeah, well, it seems to kind of punch a couple of holes in that theory.
It does, because at a gun range, and correct me if I'm wrong, everybody's walking around with a gun.
Right.
They're at the range to fire the gun.
Yeah.
They've got guns loaded.
Typically have guns and bullets and are waiting to make the bullets come out of the gun and fly at things, apparently sometimes people. So, yeah, and when Josh and I were talking about this earlier, the point kind of came up that if you're at a gun range and you're walking around and everyone's carrying a gun, there's no level of concern about the fact that some guy is standing next to you with a gun. If you were, waiting in line for the subway, you might be a little bit more concerned, like, oh, that dude's got a gun. I'm going to go over here.
Or as when Paul and I went to the casino in Connecticut?
Yes, Connecticut.
And I said to Paul, that guy's got a gut. But Paul heard that guy's got a gun and was freaked out. Because there are certain places you should not be walking around with a gun. And the gun itself is a bit of a red flag. Whereas the gun range,
right.
If everybody's walking around with guns, no red flag. I mean, until you hear the pop.
This was this is a work trip. Josh and I were going to a conference in Connecticut, and it was pretty early on in us getting to know each other. And he explained to me afterwards, after I allayed my concern about him coming up to me and saying that guy has a gun, he explained in no uncertain terms that if he saw someone walking through the casino with a gun, his response would not be, that guy has a gun. His response would be, come with me now.
That I am rather pragmatic in that sense. Get away from the guy with the gun, then explain it.
Yeah,
explain later, but first get away from the man with the gun, especially in the casino, because it seems like you lost your life savings. Hey, you go to the car, you get your rifle, and you express your concerns.
Right. Mm-hmm. And there is a certain way of allaying the information, come with me now, that will garner no questioning by the other person.
Yeah.
You say that with enough certainty, and that's just happening.
Yeah.
Come with me now. Okay. So it gets a little bit more complicated, and apparently involves Jesse Ventura.
A body?
Apparently. Kyle drew criticism. Kyle, the Chris Kyle, who was shot at the gun range, he drew criticism for drawing attention to his exploits by writing about the 150 insurgents he had killed between 1999 and 2009 in his book, American Sniper, the autobiography of the most lethal sniper in U.S. military history, which became a bestseller. Early unconfirmed reports say that his alleged killer was a former Marine. And the more complication that is involved here involves Jesse Ventura, who apparently at the time of when the shooting took place, the former SEAL was being sued by Jesse Ventura, the former Minnesota governor and ex-professional wrestler.
The body.
Yes. Over claims in the book that Kyle punched him in a 2006 bar fight over unpatriotic remarks. Now, I'm not going to tell tales out of school.
No.
But I would be concerned. Jesse Ventura is a powerful man.
Yes.
It's many, I'm not even going there.
Disreputable friends. People that, he knows people that know things.
So in the end, we don't know why these two gentlemen were shot at the Texas gun range. We do know it happened at a gun range. We do know that it really doesn't help the argument that if everyone had guns, then everyone would be a whole lot safer. So that's one of the reasons why we kind of wanted to address this issue. And it is a serious issue, and two people died, and that's really shitty. Would they have died if they weren't at a gun range, if they weren't all walking around with guns? Probably, possibly. Who can say? We don't know the motivation of the killer or why it happened in the first place. And there are plenty of ways to kill people. But it just smacks as being a little ironic that it happened where it did. In fucking Texas, no less.
When Texas, people get shot in Texas. Texas that's what they do. And that's what hey, that was my parking spot. Bang. I mean, Texas is about. They come from a gun culture. You wouldn't understand it being, one of these northeastern, liberal Ivy League, something others. Right. Yes, you wouldn't understand that kind of culture.
Well, I will say, the first time I moved out to Arizona back in 1995, I drove from here to Arizona. And when I stopped driving in Arizona, I wound up at at the house of my ex-mother-in-law, whose boyfriend was there. And within 30 seconds of being in Arizona, of being out of the car, I had a .45 Magnum put into my hand. I was in
Arizona.
I was a 19-year-old kid. I had never held a gun before in my entire life, and I just had no idea what to do. And he was like, "It's a nice gun, isn't it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, okay."
It's heavy, wasn't it?
It was surprisingly heavy.
Oh yeah, they're very heavy.
I was shocked. So yes, that is former Navy SEAL. Former Navy SEAL sniper Chris Kyle shot dead at a Texas gun range. All right.
Moving on to I think it's once again church time with David. David's going to regale us with the joys of Christianity. David, please, what has our Lord and Savior Jesus Christos done for us recently?
We really need some theme music for this.
Yes, we do.
I know. I was thinking like
organs. It's got to be organs.
Oh yeah. All right, we'll get right to work on that with thinking.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. So my subject today would be lying or deceiving children in church, and I have a particular. Well, now I have a particular strong feeling about that. It's wrong.
Now, you used to like deceiving children.
Then, okay.
Back in the day, we used to lie to kids all the time.
Those were the days.
I suppose I should rephrase that. I never would think it was good, but anyway. So, do you guys believe in the power of prayer?
Of course.
At inducing boredom, because yes, the power of prayer is fantastic at inducing boredom.
Although surprisingly not that effective a cure for insomnia.
I wouldn't know, but that does make sense. That does make sense.
Well, today's children message was the power of prayer.
Sure.
And so the pastor decided to test the Lord, as the Bible says you're not supposed to do.
No, that's against the rules.
By having the children pray to change something into something else.
Okay.
Now,
wait a second. I'm sorry.
Like alchemy?
What, like water into wine?
No. Well, sure. Yeah, we can go with that. No, but no. She had a specific thing, and it was a small little disc inside a jug of water.
Okay.
A small little disc.
What kind of disc?
Like a computer disc, a DVD, a communion
That's what she called it.
Okay.
I didn't really see it because, there are kids in the way.
You didn't push those goddamn kids out of the way?
You're bigger than them.
I only saw it when it was mostly finished, so I don't know what it looks like today. But anyway, so she told them to pray, and they prayed and whatever. And then she said, okay, well, when you're going to go to Sunday school now, and then when you come back, it will be changed because God will change it.
How old are these kids, by the way?
Maybe like 13 and under, but most of them under like 8.
Most of them under 8, so many of them under 7, the age of reason.
Yeah.
Okay, just checking. Okay, so here we go.
Well, of course.
I'm pretty sure I know where this is going.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
I've got to say, are you fucking kidding
I know.
me? God, okay.
So they leave, and then throughout the service, there were two periods where she always had the head thing on, where the microphone, and where she says, "Oh, I got to move this so that it changes better." And goes and proceeds to, jiggle it around in the water, and the whole time going, so in other words, God's not strong enough to do it if you don't move it for him.
Exactly. Well, God needs a little help.
But of course, they're there so they don't see it. So it's kind of like a, thing. You don't see what's going on, so you think, oh, it was a little disc, now it's changed. So
Okay.
they come back in, and what does it become? A washcloth? What? With a beach ball on it.
What? Okay, I'm that is a neat trick. She. How big was this disc? I mean, how big did it seem like?
Probably as big as your palm or so.
The washcloth with the beach ball.
Oh, maybe like a foot by a foot.
Okay, is it like where you take like the little piece of the ball or the seed and you drop it in the water and it expands to a dinosaur? And, ooh.
Yeah, so that would have been cool. But this is a freaking washcloth.
Well, maybe God was washing their souls and having a good time. That's why the beach ball was there.
Yeah.
Perhaps so.
So keep in mind, though, that during this entire thing, all of the parents were still in the sanctuary watching her. And so if I was a parent at the time, and I still believed, or, I'm a parent, but anyway, if I was in there and I had my kid in there, watch her do this, and then have the kid leave, and then have her be messing with it, and see how juvenilely retarded this is.
Retarded, huh?
Yeah, retarded.
Yes. Sorry, I don't know. That's the word that came out. Anyway, to see how simple it is, and how fake and how much of a liar she is being.
Yeah.
It would really piss me off, even if I believed, and I don't, and it took a lot for me not to say something.
Well, I would imagine you being someone who co-hosts and relatively atheist podcast and also goes to church and plays music. But my problem is the fact that it's so clearly a lie. Like, you're so clearly bullshitting and manipulating kids who don't understand chemistry, who haven't even reached the age of reason.
Actually, it's just water absorption.
Sure.
It's not even really chemistry.
Yeah.
Well, okay. You want to fight on that? We can get physics V. Brian involved?
Let's do that.
So, yeah.
No.
But regardless, it's obviously something that you bought for like $1.50 at a fucking magic shop. And
probably not even. It's probably like camping supplies.
Yeah, sure. And you're using that to completely just totally lie to children, to convince them that something happened which is a tangible result of the love of God due to your praying.
And apparently, even though they all believe that he really does have magical powers, this was the best she could come up with.
Yeah.
Well, I have a bit of a problem with modern technology creating something that we can use to prove magic.
Yeah.
That's a little disheartening and kind of, not annoying, I guess, but kind of part and parcel. That's really sort of the same thing. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. And the more we learn and the more educated we become, the more obvious your tricks have to end up being, because you're a con man. and you don't even think you're a con man, but, I'm just doing this one trick to instill God so that then they all believe, and it's no worry, my conscience is clear of blah, blah, blah. No, it's a con job, it's dirty pool, and it's really kind of pathetic. And at this point, I'm just saying it's pathetic.
It is completely and totally pathetic. Like that.
But it's a washcloth.
That's the best you could do. That's what you got. God can move mountains and washcloths. Yeah. Plus, I've always wondered, whatever happens if the Wicked Witch of the West gets thirsty? No, this is related.
She drinks Tang.
Oh, that does make sense.
Wicked Witch of the West, Tang, all the way. Because adding the Tang mixture to it neutralizes the acidity.
Well, Tang does have emulsifiers. And everybody knows that emulsification is the key to anything. Washcloths, beef balls, anything.
Emulsification, no doubt.
All right.
Indeed.
Church time with David. We look forward to more and more stories. Although honestly, it's kind of a horrible story.
I know.
It's really shitty.
But
yeah, well,
but I couldn't not talk about it.
Well, it's certainly true.
Well, as much as I like lying to children, and that's high on my list of things that I want to do, that seems like a really stupid lie. And I mean, let's just say, it's not. Why not pick something cooler? I mean, really, that's. I mean, if you're gonna bullshit the kids, then you're just bullshitting them. That's. I don't agree with that. But if that's what you're gonna, at least do it well.
Dinosaurs.
Yes, turn it into a. Wait, I don't know. Is she allowed to believe in dinosaurs?
They're okay with gays, so I imagine evolution's not too far off.
All right.
And the age of the Earth.
So she could probably go with a tablet that turns into a dinosaur.
And it's just a toy anyway. It's not like she's saying, "Oh, dinosaurs are real and creationism is wrong."
It's a great behemoth.
Not like a real.
Well, okay, fine. Make it a lion. Something else. Fine.
I think
science fiction character.
I would be impressed if you put a disc in water, and then after an hour and a half, out came the actual, real, live, reincarnated Jesus Christ. That would be a good trick.
Yes, indeed.
Even if that Jesus Christ looked very much like Teller.
Yeah, that'd be fine. I'd still be fine with that. Although I would have my questions, because that Teller has done some amazing stuff.
Teller.
Not so much. Teller? Oh, yes.
And he could pop out and he could be like, I could talk, too.
It's a miracle.
Prayer.
Yes, prayer and magnets.
Mm-hmm. How do they work? Moving on. I guess, thank you, David, for that. That was quite fantastic, and I'm going to say jovial. And I guess we'll be right back.
Do you have questions, comments, concerns, or random musings? Email us at reason@wnyatheist.org. Out of boredom, you should check us out on Twitter and follow @Reason Podcast. We appreciate it when folks retweet us because it makes us feel smart and important. Listen live Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern on blogtalkradio.com. Call in, join the conversation at 424-243-9589. Can't listen live on Sundays because you're too busy praying to whatever gods you believe in? We are also on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and you can download the show from wnyatheist.org/reason.php. Find us on Facebook at Reason Podcast, and go ahead and like us. We'll take your liking us as loving us, and that will sufficiently satisfy our egos. We know you're out there, we know you're listening, and we appreciate it more than these words can say.
And we have returned.
Oh, yeah, we just keep chatting. Like, oh, yeah, radio show. Forgot about that. All right, so, Josh, you were going to do a little bit of a discussion here about the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, while I flog David with a switch.
Yes, indeed. Well, the World Bank exists. We all know it exists. It's out there, and it does something. But what is the World Bank? And that actually is a bit of a complex question because there are a few fairly powerful intergovernmental organizations which kind of blur together and get overlapped. The two that are most closely affiliated are, of course, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, which actually makes sense based upon their position, their intention, and their history. It becomes a bit of a blur, so you can't really discuss the World Bank without at least including something on the IMF. And I tried to cut it down because there's a lot of stuff on the IMF which is very weird. People really hate the IMF.
It's somewhat evil in some certain ways.
Right, but not as evil as people say it is.
Perhaps.
The same thing about the World Bank, although the World Bank almost as evil as they say it is. But that's neither here nor there.
Well, I saw that Zeitgeist movie, and that seemed compelling.
Yeah, it was a good time. Okay, specifically, superficially, the World Bank and the IMF exhibit many common characteristics between the two of them. Both are in a broad sense, owned and directed by the governments of the member nations. The People's Republic of China, which is the most populous state on Earth, is a member, as is the world's largest industrialized power, the United States. In fact, virtually...
We're number one.
Yes. Virtually every country on Earth is a member of both institutions. Both institutions concern themselves with economic issues and concentrate their efforts on broadening and strengthening the economies of their member nations. Staff members of both the World Bank and the IMF often appear at international conferences, speaking at the same time, the same language of economics, the same development professions. They're wildly interconnected. The two institutions also hold joint annual meetings, which, they're covered by the news media as one thing. Both have headquarters in Washington, D.C., and so there's a lot of confusion as to where one begins and the other ends.
Well, there seems to be a lot of confusion as to where one begins and the other ends. And also, there seems to be a bit of a fuzzy distinction between Washington, D.C., the United States of America, the most powerful nation on Earth, and the World Bank, which we are not. It's an international community.
Oh, yes, and it's, member nations get to decide what's going on and how they do things. But despite the similarities, the World Bank and the IMF remain distinct and separate. The fundamental difference is this. The World Bank is primarily a development institution. The IMF is a cooperative institution that seeks to maintain an orderly system of payments and receipts between nations. So far, so good.
It doesn't, that has a couple of code words that concern me, but
yes.
Go ahead.
They have different purposes, a different and distinct structure, and they get their funding from different sources. All right, so, they also apply to different nations. So they're two different banking institutions. Remember how the American banking crisis we had because we got the two different kinds of banks and merged them together. Mm-hmm. There were lending banks, and then there were regular, town banks where you put your money.
Right.
And they did these things very differently, and the overlap is what caused a lot of problems, with buying and selling fake money. So they keep themselves fairly distinct, so they're at least avoiding that sort of problem.
Okay.
The IMF and the World Bank, and I'll throw in here just to be on the safe side, the World Trade Organization, are basically the three central pillars of the global economy. And they've been called, quote, the architects of the world economy. And I've seen that in 5 or 6 places, so I like that. The architects of the world economy.
Ooh, like the Matrix.
Yes, indeed. The IMF and the World Bank were originally established at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, and that's Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. They were mainly funded by the United States to rebuild shattered world economies after they broke down, following the Great Depression and the Second World War. Mm-hmm. The industrialized world just went to shit. So, during the Nazi occupation of Europe, the capitalists had either fled Europe or were collaborating with the Nazis. So basically, the banking institutions and the money makers and money lenders were either Nazis or were not in Europe.
And that in no way, shape, or form involves the royal family.
No. That's a whole nother show.
Yes, it is.
Socialists, in contrast, had been active organizers of resistance groups. And by the end of the war, the revolution ideologies just swept through Europe. Workers and farmers are seizing their factories, seizing their farms, and it looks like there may be a socialist revolution in your France, in your Germany after the war. I mean, it looks like the socialists are taking over. Oh my God.
I can't have that.
No. So in order to defend the post-war capitalist nations against the revolution and the rise of socialism, the U.S. went ahead and carried out a massive program of aid and redevelopment in Europe. Now, since these were capitalist countries and they were all in shambles, the U.S. could create a new world economy with itself as the head and, oddly enough, the only functional capitalist economy left. So it was pretty advantageous to us. So it's the task of the IMF and the World Bank to sort of take over this problem Over the past decades, however, the recipients of the international loans have switched away from Western Europe because they got over the war to the undeveloped world to grow the capitalist system and act as a benefactor and continue the war against communism and socialism, which has dominated the 20th century.
It really has, too. It's been the whole 20th century.
So the professed idea behind the World Bank is that of an international financial institution which provides loans to developing countries for capital programs. All right?
Well, it sounds good, but I see an immediate problem there, which you may or may not address. But don't loans usually come with a burden of interest?
It's not just the interest that's the problem.
Okay, all right.
But we'll get to that. The official goal of the World Bank is the reduction of poverty. According to the World Bank's Articles of Agreement, as amended effectively in 1950s, in 1979, and again in 1989, all decisions must be guided by a commitment to promote foreign investment, international trade, and facilitate capital investment. So far, still so good. The World Bank differs from the World Bank Group in that the World Bank comprises only two institutions, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which you mentioned earlier, and the International Development Association. The World Bank is specifically just making loans. There are a lot of other groups that come along with it, that tag along, that are part of the contract and the loan agreement. But the World Bank is a central and let's say the specific lender and holder of capital.
Okay.
The World Bank is loosely interpreted, and you could say this either way, good or bad, is basically a tool for globalism. It's a tool for modernizing the world.
Sure.
And modernizing, of course, means, capitalism, which has, been pretty beneficial for the countries that have practiced it for a long time.
Well, at the sacrifice of many other countries who are used by it. But
Herein is the situation. Since their founding, the IMF and the World Bank have been used as an instrument for defending capitalism and maximizing the profits of big multinational corporations and maintaining the domination of the U.S. over the world economy. Mm-hmm. Because, again, we're the ones loaning money. We're the ones that can forgive your debt. We're the ones that can do everything. We can also tell you how you can spend the money. So within the shared net framework of the IMF and the World Bank, there's a division of labor and functions between them. And since 1995, the World Trade Organization is also included in this. Mm-hmm. Okay, these generally overlap, but, the World Bank makes long-term loans to governments to finance development projects such as roads, power plants, schools, dams, bridges, ports, infrastructure.
Seems good.
Good deal. Oh, yeah. The IMF decides which countries are eligible for international loans. So recently the IMF has been focusing on bailing out countries facing economic emergencies. In the aughts, they after 1997, 1998 economic meltdown in Asia, they focused a lot of attention on East Asia, what they call the Asian tigers.
That's a terrible name.
It really is. Surprisingly little has been done to focus on sub-Saharan Africa. But
surprisingly,
they've loaned a lot of money, but there actually hasn't been a lot of honest-to-goodness investment. Mm. Okay, the IMF and World Bank will only extend loans if countries agree to accept the Structural Adjustment Programs, the SAPs. SAPs are not democratically decided upon by the people in the debtor countries. To pay off the loans, the IMF and the World Bank demand that governments raise money by selling off public assets and companies, which is privatization, and cutting state expenditure on social services like healthcare, education, childcare, and pensions. So they demand that you have to pay the interest. You have to pay it. It's very important.
And I think more so than that, they're actually demanding that you move and take steps towards converting from a socialist agenda to a completely capitalist one.
Or from any pre-industrialized agenda as well. So you're not socialist or capitalist. But what they want is they want the diamonds in sub-Saharan Africa. They want the cheap labor in Asia. This is what they want, and they demand that you produce it.
Yeah.
SAPs require, and I keep wanting to call them SAPs, so I may slip into that, and I apologize. SAPs require countries to deregulate and open up their economy to free trade by cutting subsidies to local industries and slashing trade barriers and tariffs. Countries have to open up their economies to foreign businesses, usually multinationals from Western countries. remove restrictions on foreign investment, and allow corporations access to the workers and the natural resources of the countries at bargain basement prices. The vast majority of the profits are made by the multinational corporations and are then brought home to the Western countries where the organizations are based.
America land.
Or Europe as well.
Europe land.
Basically what they do is they go into, let's say they go into sub-Saharan Africa, let's say they go into Ghana. Mm-hmm. They go into Ghana and they demand that you have to produce a certain amount of money, or you can sell the rights to your diamond mines to Bob over here. Now, Bob will give you a lot of money for those diamond mines, and then he'll pull the diamonds out, he'll turn a profit, but then the money he gives you for the diamond mines, you can use to pay off your debts. See how well this works?
That sounds suspiciously like buying a country.
Yes, it is. SAPs encourage export-oriented growth, selling cheap raw materials or commodities on the world market, cash crops, garments, computer chips, whatever, to generate hard currency. All in all, the IMF and the World Bank, SAPs, turn countries into loan repayment machines, generating easy profits for the world's richest corporations and banks, which is nice for us in the West. It's very nice.
We're number one.
Yes. IMF policies also both directly and indirectly impact workers in the U.S. and other advanced capitalist countries because they're partially funded with public money. So your taxpayer money funds the IMF, and then the IMF gives that money to a country that doesn't have labor laws. So that your job, the one that paid you the money that you paid the taxes with, your job now goes over to China.
Right. It doesn't have minimum wage, it doesn't have labor laws.
Exactly. And that, again, doesn't really benefit me as much as it does, Apple, so to speak. Yeah. Now, this is what I would call a redistribution of wealth upwards to the richest Americans and Europeans. And it's similar to that which accompanies any public subsidy of a corporation. So it's basically subsidizing, American tax dollars are subsidizing. Again, I'll go with Apple because they've gotten a lot of flack for, having people jump out of their buildings in suicide attempts because they're prisoners. So big corporations, though serviced by the U.S. government money, are accountable to no national interest and only to their shareholders.
That is certainly true.
So the effect of the IMF World Bank programs are basically to lower wages and working conditions worldwide, which exerts a downward pressure on workers' living standards in the industrialized nations because now we're competing with people that don't have the same set of rules. And there's no restriction. There were no plants in these other countries. We built plants in these other countries so they could steal our jobs. And we used tax dollars to do it.
Well, it sounds like what you're describing is basically a money laundering scheme where we take tax dollars, take public funds and money.
And we claim we're doing it to help poor people in Indonesia.
Right, but we take that money, we send it to Indonesia, and then it comes back not to us, but to private corporations who couldn't take the tax money directly. So this is a neat little end around on that whole process.
It is. Now, the IMF and the World Bank claim that the what they call neoliberal reforms, while may be unpleasant, but in the end lay the basis for major economic growth and therefore higher living standards. So it should be good for everyone.
Sure.
But the evidence actually doesn't really support that at all. In fact, the evidence kind of does the opposite. The IMF and World Bank loans have created a huge debt trap. And this is what you were talking about before. The overwhelming debt has led the poorest countries in the world to allocate enormous portions of their national income toward paying interest to the World Bank. And the logic of this is that the money is actually flowing from the world's poorest countries to the richer countries.
Right.
And if stop and think about how things work with the mafia. The mafia takes a nickel from everybody. And they take a nickel from the people that are too weak to defend themselves. And the mafia, because they're smaller in number, become really, really wealthy. That's basically how this works, is they're forcing you to pay the rich people lots of money and take a little bit of money from everybody, but these are all incredibly poor people. So a little bit of money is actually a lot for them.
Right.
And they get roads. They get roads, they get plants, they get, jobs that earn money. True. And this is all very well and good. And the defense of the World Bank is that it does create a larger marketplace. So it creates more labor. So I get cheaper T-shirts. Mm-hmm. Folks that didn't have jobs or were working on farms doing backbreaking labor are now working in factories doing what did Durkheim call it? Developing a sense of anomie.
Okay.
Durkheim, the sociologist.
Sociology, fake secondary science.
Of course. The debt is one of the most important weapons with which the big capitalist powers dominate the poorer countries. The IMF and the World Bank use debt as leverage to pry open new markets and gain access to cheap labor and raw materials. In order to get new credit, to get more loans, you have to keep up with your loan repayment and not default on your loans. And if you look at the countries that this applies to, it's usually former colonial countries. So it's basically the British Empire. French as well, but mostly the British Empire. And they have to accept these rules or else they cannot compete fairly in the world market because they just are not industrialized. So they have to take the deal, and then they end up getting screwed by the deal. I mean, I see why they do it.
It certainly seems that way.
It also is very beneficial to the people in power in the debtor countries because they actually get to be in a position where they have to do these things. They have to have higher taxes. They have to cut social services, a lot like what they're talking about doing in Wisconsin. They have to basically turn the people into serfs to support this system, and they, of course, get a pretty good-sized nickel out of the whole process as well.
Well, right, and they form friendly relationships with us.
Yes, and it worked really well when we had a lot of really good dictatorial countries in the world, especially leading up to the 90s. Mm-hmm. They started falling apart after that, so it's actually causing us a little bit of grief here in the West. The developing nations pay the West 9 times more in debt. Actually, excuse me. Today, the developing world owes a total of $2.5 trillion in international debt to big banks and the IMF, the World Bank as well. Developing nations pay the West 9 times more in debt repayment than they receive in aid from Western countries.
Really?
Yes. Mozambique is a pretty good example. They pay something like 15 times interest what they actually owe, or what they actually get.
It's like borrowing from a loan shark.
It really is. So between 1982 and 1990, $927 billion was loaned to undeveloped countries. But in the same period, these debtor countries paid $1,345 billion to international banks in debt service. So they're coming out short by like $4 billion.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty good penny to a lot of these developing countries.
And basically a Ponzi scheme.
Yes. Debtor countries began the 90s 61% more in debt than they were in 1982. Sub-Saharan Africa's debt increased by 113% in that decade. 113% their debt increased. So, according to the World Bank themselves, poverty in Africa increased 50% between 1994 and 2000. Why? Well, one reason is that virtually every nation in Sub-Saharan Africa entered into a structural adjustment program, a SAP, in the 1980s. Yet for the entire decade, the gross national product in the region fell by 2.2% per year, and per capita income declined to pre-independence levels. So everything they had gained up to that point, they lost, and they're going further into debt, and they're having more and more problems, even with this influx of cash that we're claiming to give them, simply because of the loan repayment we demand.
Right, it's pretty much that line from Goodfellas, which is, fuck you, pay me.
It really is. So all of Sub-Saharan Africa spends $10 billion a year in debt service to banks, more than is spent on health and education combined for the entire region. Why is there an AIDS crisis there? Gosh, I don't know. For example, Zimbabwe, between 1990 and 1993, cut its spending on primary health and basic education by 33%. Under an IMF-imposed SAP. It's against this background that we can begin to understand the wave of wars and ethnic violence that swept Africa in the past couple of decades. Because we're flowing money in there, but the only people that are getting the money are local warlords and American corporations.
Yeah, that's problematic.
It really is. Now, Latin America owes more than 1/3 of its total economic output in a year to other countries and banks. Haiti, the IMF and World Bank blocked the government from raising the minimum wage and then demanded the privatization of profitable public companies, which generated revenue for desperately needed services. The IMF insisted that Haiti should cut government services by half in spite of a national shortage of teachers and healthcare workers. Oh, and the life expectancy in Haiti, 49 years old.
Now, why specifically would they block the raising of a minimum wage standard? What benefit does that serve the IMF?
Well, they're spending more money on taking care of the people and not paying back their debt.
Yeah.
Additionally,
that's dirty pool.
Additionally, Bob's corporation doesn't want to pay more for workers.
Well, yeah.
So
we all know Bob doesn't like to pay out.
Now, that's pretty damning, but I'm going to go back to something that you discussed a little earlier to close. Members of the World Bank have what's called sovereign immunity.
Mm-hmm.
Sovereign immunity, and here's get a little more explanation to folks out there to just sandwich what you began with. Sovereign immunity, or they also call it crown immunity, is a legal doctrine by which the sovereign or state cannot commit a legal wrong and is immune from civil suit or criminal prosecution. The World Bank requires sovereign immunity from countries it deals with. Sovereign immunity waives a holder from all legal liability for their actions. It's proposed that this immunity from responsibility is a, quote, shield which the World Bank wants to resort to for escaping accountability and security by the people. Now, that's strong words, but does seem to be that way. I will say that sovereign immunity doesn't apply to things like the Red Cross.
Okay.
The Red Cross does not have sovereign immunity. Any number of other non-for-profit international corporations do not have sovereign immunity. So the fact that international organizations do have sovereign immunity is not entirely true.
Okay.
International for-profit companies have sovereign immunity. International not-for-profits don't necessarily. It's very difficult for them to get this.
Because we only care about profits.
Right. Well, sovereign immunity is available to countries in international court, but if they're acting as a contracting body, for example, making agreements in regards to extracting oil and selling it, then sovereign immunity may not be available to them. So, since the World Bank just loans money and doesn't actually do any of the dirty work of, setting up companies or doing those things, they automatically have sovereign immunity. So, under international law, and subject to some conditions, countries are immune from legal proceedings in another state entirely. This stems from customary international law, but only in 1976 did it begin to apply to international corporations. So it didn't apply up until 1976 when we started doing a lot of work in East Asia and Africa. So it wasn't until we realized that we might have a need for sovereign immunity did it actually kick in.
Well, it looks like Susanna Mendaro was just a couple of years too late then.
Exactly. So what does that leave you with? It leaves you with a massive international bank which loans money under the pretense of bringing an end to poverty and bringing freedom and liberty to the world, which all sounds very good and seems like a good idea.
It's a nice mission statement.
But it actually provides a massive economic benefit to multinational corporations and propagates what I and others have referred to as neo-colonialism. And I know that I've gotten into arguments with people many a time when I refer to America as colonial or imperial. A lot of people say, well, no, we don't invade, we don't do anything. No, we don't.
Well, we kind of. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but what we do is we do something much more cunning. It's a much sharper tool that we use.
Yes.
It's much more strategic. We get you to ask us to owe us lots of money. And that way, we can do whatever we want. We can force you to sell your diamond mines. We can force you to keep your wage labor incredibly low. We can take your oil, whatever we need to do, whatever natural resource that you have that could make you a power player on the world stage, that could allow your country to come out of poverty. Mm-hmm. We loan you money and then force you to privatize so that our corporations can come in there and make all the money off of that, which is just the opposite of, think about it. Think about Venezuela.
Okay.
Venezuela nationalized the oil industry, and Venezuela has a lot of oil. Mm-hmm. They didn't privatize it and sell it to corporations. They said, fuck you. The government owns the oil. That's all, and we're going to do it. And Venezuelans have a fairly high standard of living compared to the rest of Latin America.
Yes.
They also have a ton of money, and they have social welfare programs and a number of other things. And we'll forget about the fact that they're sort of pseudo-socialists. That's neither here nor there. What they are is they're non-privatized.
Right.
Which means that there's no additional middleman skimming from the pot. It's like Medicare. Mm-hmm. Medicare is the government-owned health care. Mm-hmm. It has 2% overhead costs. It costs 2% to run Medicare. It costs like 35% to run United Healthcare.
Right. And that's something that you and I have always discussed, which is the greatest barrier to having a universal healthcare system and having that be privatized in any way, and having private healthcare that still covered a majority, if not all, of Americans, is the fact that private companies need to make a profit. Medicare just needs to stay afloat. They just need to pay their employees.
Exactly.
And that's why it's a better idea to have
a single-payer system, even if it's a private corporation that's a not-for-profit. Not even a government entity, private, not-for-profit organization. It's just one organization, and granted, there's no competition to make it cheaper, but there's also, if it's a not-for-profit, no incentive for additional money to be yanked out of the system.
Right.
And that's the thing that they're doing here, is they're creating a system which requires a middleman and then offering up the West as middlemen.
Yes.
So our middlemen get to make a lot of money off this, and I don't think it's an evil, demonic, horrible thing that they're suggesting. A lot of people demonize them. It seems to me that it's literally just good business. Well, we set up the system in our favor, and then we exploited it. What's the problem with that? That's capitalism.
My problem is not that it's immoral, is that it does seem amoral.
Well, capitalism is amoral.
Yes.
I mean, capitalism is the worship of capital. That's the thing that we measure things by. If you have lots of money, you are successful. If you don't, you are not. It's not amoral. I would say it's differently moral.
Okay.
That instead of doing good or anything along those lines, it's accumulating profit. Profit is inherently good, therefore it is good to make a profit. This makes a profit, and you can let yourself sleep good at night by saying that we gave, $95 billion to your countries. Mm-hmm. I mean, we demanded 1,300 billion back, but we gave 900 billion. And we also got our companies in there, which are employing people.
Sure.
With Western technology, which they wouldn't have had before, so we'll be able to extract your natural resources more quickly. We're also taking a huge profit out of it. So, I mean, it's not entirely evil. It's just a little dickish.
It seems that way. And I was just going to ask, have you seen any numbers at all? And I don't even know what metric you would use to judge this upon, but for countries that receive loans from the World Bank or the IMF or anything like that, do they have an increase in the standard of living?
No, they have a decrease in the standard of living.
And that's just kind of straight across the board?
Across the board. The only difference is in China, their GDP has changed substantially, so that they've screwed up the numbers, because a lot of people in China, much like what they did in Russia after the Soviet Union fell, their economy fell apart. They developed a lot of really, really, really rich people. Just not most people.
Right.
There were, a couple of dozen or a couple of hundred incredibly rich, let's call them barons of industry or warlords, so to speak. But everybody else, it's actually gone down. So, statistically, it's gone down, even though for some in successful countries like the Soviet Union and China, it's gone up for some people. And the wealthy pool has risen. It has grown. There are more rich people in China than there used to be.
Well,
it's just that most of the people in China are actually poorer. So it still goes down on average.
It doesn't seem like a viable system that could last for a very long time. It seems like this is eventually going to fail.
Well, if you recall, there are some politicians that have supported the idea of debt forgiveness. That what you have to do is just forgive the debt. I mean, we've made a lot. Our multinational corporations have already taken a lot of money out of there. Yeah. The West has made a lot of money. To be perfectly honest, the World Bank doesn't need the money. The corporations have already gotten their beaks wet in all these little countries, and debt forgiveness might at least allow some of the good that the World Bank professes to do to actually take hold. If they no longer have to pay the interest on these loans, then the infrastructure actually could be used by the people to get around, to fix up their hospitals, to do any number of good things which the World Bank is supposed to be promoting. So debt forgiveness, and again, not even kicking the American corporations out, just the debt forgiveness itself could turn the tables, and that's something which has been floated since the late 90s It's never taken hold because the people at the World Bank get to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And they're not responsible to, the taxpayers like us.
Well, it seems like all the World Bank needs to do is to give the world that $2.5 trillion coin.
Yeah, I really wish Obama would have done that $1 trillion coin, man. That would have been great. Just printed that $1 trillion coin. That would have been a great fuck you.
And if you're making
fuck you.
If you're making one, you might as well make two.
Yeah, why not make 7?
Yes.
$7 trillion, that would take us out of a lot of debt. That'd be nice.
Yeah, that'd solve a lot of imaginary problems that exist with the imaginary economy.
Yes, but that's basically the heart of my I guess we didn't do a rant today, so maybe that's my rant against the World Bank. I don't think it's evil. I just think that, having money be your only metric of success is not really the way that I work. And as an atheist who was raised without any outside metric for good or bad, I was just raised, don't be a dick. It seems like that rule would apply here. Just don't be a dick, and you can solve a lot of the world's problems, and possibly make the world economy bigger, which might make more money for everyone.
Perhaps so. And, that's the problem with capitalism. One of the problems with capitalism is it's set up in such a way to keep the people who have the resources so that they continue to have the resources. And I think the World Bank, as you're describing it, is just another example of that.
Right. I mean, truth be told, capitalism has brought a ton of success and a ton of wealth and comfort to the countries which originally adopted it. The problem is, like feudalism before it, and like any of the systems that are earlier, it perpetuates by keeping those in power. And that's the nature of society. That's not something to be argued against.
Right.
But whenever the systems crumble and they're replaced, like feudalism was replaced by mercantilism, it brought a ton of money. It hurt a lot of the rich lords, but it brought a ton of money for everyone, and then every boat rose. So I'm hoping that as we move forward in the next coming decades, we're able to do something like that. We're tear down the really dickish parts of the international capitalist system and not get rid of it, because it's been very beneficial to a lot of people. But do that, and it might, just get rid of some of the really, really jackassy things. And it could be, again, a fantastic boon for the entire world. For us in America, for the people in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Indonesia, and Nicaragua.
Well, yes. I mean, it's nice in theory. It is going to require a lot of people to give up a lot of the power that they have, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, that's how things always are.
All right. Well, that was an interesting discussion into the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, see, that's the problem with talking about stuff like this. Is like, it does seem like when we do, you and I are kind of crossing over to side on the same shores of a lot of the people who are absolutely batshit crazy.
Well, the problem I have is that the batshit crazy people aren't always wrong.
Right.
It's just that, first off, they believe there's a devious plan where there's people sitting around in a dark room, a dark, smoky room, plotting world destruction, and they believe that these things are done on purpose, as opposed to, people in situations making the best choice they can at the time for themselves. Which is what always happens.
Yep.
It's not a grand conspiracy. It's not some evil thing. I'm sure that folks in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, when they came up with their basic idea to get all the capitalists that ran out of Europe and all the post-war capitalists after World War II together to rebuild Europe, seems like a fine idea. Why not put in a couple of hangers on that help out the United States a little more? Why not? Because we did win. And then just keep that sort of same system running. Apply it to Sub-Saharan Africa, apply it to Latin America, apply it to East Asia.
Sure.
This is not an evil thing. It's just, a selfish thing.
Pretty much. And I mean, left to its own accord, water flows downhill and money flows uphill. And that's just kind of the way it is.
Well, that's my problem, though. That's the way the systems are set up.
Yeah.
They're done deliberately to be that way because the systems are set up by those in power. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't set up a system that sabotages you.
No, that would be stupid.
Right, it would be stupid. And it's not a grand evil conspiracy. It's just people, again, acting in their own self-interest in that Ayn Randian sense.
Yes. Ayn Rand. She'll save every one of us.
Pretty sure that's Flash Gordon, my friend.
Flash Gordon, Ayn Rand, I can't tell the difference. One of them was from Russia, and the other one
Flash Gordon, yeah.
fought Ming the Merciless.
Yeah, Ayn Rand was fighting Ming the Merciless, and Flash Gordon was from Russia.
That's what the Fountainhead was about.
Yes.
I mean, as far as I understood it.
I'm pretty sure that Flash Gordon is nothing more than a cinematic or a literary retelling of, the story of the Fountainhead.
All right. Well, that's the World Bank, Ayn Rand, and Flash Gordon.
All together as one.
Let's move on. We're going to move on to You're Wrong, and let me tell you why. Now, once again, we have a topic worth discussing here, as we typically try to do. Sometimes we fail. But we'll see. So the topic for this week is, and Josh and I have we struggled over the language of this particular statement. The reason we struggled was not because we couldn't craft a cohesive argument about it, but we basically went back and forth because we realized that if we left any holes in the situation, the other person was certainly going to take advantage and exploit them.
Yes, we had to word this correctly so that we didn't sabotage the argument.
So thinking in terms of the Gene Roddenberry Star Trek kind of sensibility, the topic for this week is civilization will evolve to a place where we no longer require a monetary economic system. No money. All right, so Josh is going to flip a coin. I guess, obviously heads will be the affirmative, and I think this week you should take the coin.
I'm taking the coin. Okay. Well... and it's tails.
All right. So that means that I am actually going to be arguing that we will evolve into a place where we no longer require a monetary economic system. And I think this is obvious and this is evident that this is what's going to happen because the entire economic system since the dawn of civilization has been based upon one important principle, and that is scarcity. Eventually, our civilization will take one of two courses, both of which will eliminate the dollar from our pockets. The first course would be that we're going to fucking blow ourselves up and just be done with it. And no more civilization, no more money, so on and so forth. But
I'm not sure that would count as evolving to a civilization without that, but okay.
The other option is that we will actually get better and better with technology and our understanding and harnessing of the energy that is available out there in the entire universe. Now, at the point where we can harness the energy from an entire star, for example, which is not something, it's theoretically possible. And if we ever do evolve to that situation, all of the scarcity that exists in the world and in the populations exists because of, in one way, shape, or form, a lack of energy. Now, once we're able to harness enough energy so that scarcity no longer exists, and we can make, food replicators, those would be nice. And, and all things like that. There's not going to be a need to mark the scarcity, i.e. there's not going to be a need to keep track of who owes what to whom because there's going to be plenty of resources for all. And I think that is clear. That is, one of the two paths which civilization could take. And I think ultimately, if we do survive, it's what's going to happen.
All right, well, that seems fairly compelling, but I have 3 words for you in this Roddenberry-inspired argument.
I like cheese.
Gold-pressed latinum.
The fucking Ferengi.
Because, truth be told, it would be nice. It would be fantastic if we could just, get rid of money and we would all live our lives in peace and harmony, with flower power. Something along those lines. That would be fantastic, and I would be on board. Except that since the dawn of time, since you brought it up, the dawn of civilization, we have had a means of transference of goods.
Sure.
We've had a mechanism to do this. We have always had some sort of power that instituted a currency of sorts, barter system that they talk about. Yeah, that never actually existed historically. It was always either just giving things to your friend or there was money. Right. Be they conch or those kochi shells, conch shells, the little shells they used.
Conch shells.
Yeah. Was it those, or is it gold, or is it money in the fiat system? It doesn't really matter. There's always been some way to gauge the value of things, because, truth be told, who wouldn't want the most comfortable chair? And now there is scarcity again, because now we have to produce all the most comfortable chair. And no one produces the uncomfortable chair, because the comfortable chair is more comfortable objectively. So there is always going to be a scarcity, and the systems, as they have been set up and developed, produce this false scarcity of money. that there's just a certain amount of money in circulation, so there is the accumulation of wealth. Now, if you were to eliminate money entirely, let's say it's just gone, then you would have some sort of status system, and that status system would involve different hierarchies and levels. Those hierarchies and levels could be easily transferred over into some objective metric to gauge who is more powerful, who's higher on the hierarchy, and that will become a means of credit. That is a means of getting things done. That's a means of accomplishing things. That, my friend, is money.
So it's
still the case. Even if you eliminate money, you will create a new economy with a new form of money. There will always be a currency. We have to gauge what things are and why they're valuable, because otherwise you would have nothing but everyone having the best of everything, and then the best would be a scarcity. You would have to then produce the best of everything. Nobody would want the crappy chair. Everybody want the best chair, so there has to be a way to gauge that and to rectify the disparity of work and value in people. I mean, that's something that's always been done, and I think it's naive to suggest there's even the possibility we couldn't.
Well, I think there's a couple of flaws in your thinking. Number one, you seem to be making the argument that, I don't know, Picard got paid more than Riker or something. But I think ultimately it doesn't seem like you're able to envision a situation where the planet, the galaxy, the solar system, the universe, whatever, functions without scarcity. But this could clearly come about if we had an overabundance of energy available to us. Now, I don't think
energy is the only thing that fuels the economy.
Okay.
There's objective value to things. So let's go back to my chair example.
Okay.
Everybody wants the most comfortable chair. Somebody will create a more comfortable chair.
Okay.
And then everyone will want the more comfortable chair. So then you've got to shift all manufacturing over to the more comfortable chair. And now you've got a scarcity of more comfortable chairs, and you've got a surplus of less comfortable chairs. And of course, there's a hierarchy and there's a status to having a more comfortable chair. There will still continue to be a scarcity as civilization and technology increases. It will create new things. New things take time to be diluted throughout the system. There will always be a scarcity, and those with power, being easily transferred into a currency of sorts, provides them with more. Therefore, you will always have a scarcity. Even in a perfect reality where we have replicators, then, well, who has the best replicator? Ooh, who gets a holodeck? Ooh, who gets a holodeck with hot chicks? I want the holodeck hot chick program.
What's the point of a holodeck if you don't have hot chicks?
Exactly. Well, there are hotter chicks to have in your holodeck program. And there are more things. Technology will continue to produce more. We will get smarter. And as we get smarter, we'll produce better. The better things will be of higher scarcity. Let's say more scarcity. And the less new things will be of lower scarcity, and that's just the way it will be. Technology will increase, and there will still be a scarcity.
I think you're missing the point. I mean, the problem is you seem to be stuck on not being able to envision a universe where if a better chair was designed, then there would be enough resources and energy so that everyone could have a better chair instantly, within a femtosecond.
I actually am having trouble envisioning that.
No, I think that's what's going to happen.
So you're saying it's going to require massive, large-scale, full house-size replicators.
Yes.
So this is something that you believe is a reasonable proposition.
This is entirely possible. As soon as we harness the power from the sun, or perhaps a more powerful star.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Who can say?
Exactly.
Then we get a stronger grasp on Einstein's theory of energy and mass being equivalent, and we can convert energy to mass, create replicators.
What if I create a better replicator? Can you then replicate my better replicator? And is that like wishing for more wishes from a genie?
In a femtosecond. I can just snap my fingers, my replicator becomes your replicator.
Why would I create a better replicator?
You're bored?
No, I've got a holodeck full of really, really hot chicks.
Well,
the hottest chick I could possibly imagine. You know the hottest chick I could possibly fantasize about? Bang. Holodeck full of that. Oh, by the way, orgy of food as well. I can have anything I want. Why would I act? People act out of need. And without need, there's no act. Well, civilization becomes stagnant.
It sounds like what you're saying then is that we could evolve into a place where we no longer require a monetary economic system. It may, and I'm not sure I disagree with you, it may be the downfall, the eventual downfall of our civilization as we all become fat and do nothing and have everything handed to us.
We'll have a pill that allows us to stay in tip-top condition.
Well, that's certainly true.
Of course.
Even if we ate at McDonald's for a month straight.
But it wouldn't be McDonald's. There'd be the food store.
Well, there's still...
Actually, no, there'd be the food replicator. I would never leave my house.
I wouldn't even own a pair of pants.
Nope. So that would fix the economy right there. No one would buy pants.
That is absolutely true. And that's all we need to do to fix the economy is get rid of pants, create replicators, and really comfortable chairs.
Exactly. Well, see, it just goes back to my problem that people create out of need. People create to fill a void. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until capitalism that the technological boom took over. Capitalism came in, and all of a sudden there was value assigned to things. There was value assigned to technologies, value assigned to innovation. And once that happened, technology boomed. It exploded, and we developed things like microwave ovens and 3D TVs. These things happened because there was an economic incentive behind them. Without the incentive, why do we proceed? Why do we move forward?
Well, ultimately, yes, that could be a problem with civilization, but I don't think it refutes the argument effectively at all that your position that we could not evolve to a place where we no longer require a monetary economic system, which is the point of the argument. Now, you've argued, I would say it's add Latin word or moving the goalposts or something to argue the point
logical fallacies
that even when we get rid of the monetary system, there would still be a pseudo economy that existed. That's missing the point of the discussion, which is that we will no longer require a monetary economic system. I think my position is clear.
And I think it's inherently flawed in every way. When we went off the gold standard, which was the basis for the old economic monetary system, we invented the fiat system, which is another economic monetary system. And before that, we had basically, silver and gold. We had valuable items that are transferred. We still have 7 or 8 different economies going on, if you include the stock market, collectibles, any number of other things that act as a pseudo-economy. We still have 6 or 7 of them going on, and we've got one economic system. We've got multiples going on simultaneously. This will continue to act because there will be only one Mona Lisa. And the Mona Lisa will be more valuable. And someone will own that.
You could replicate it.
Well, you couldn't replicate the Mona Lisa. You could replicate a Mona Lisa, not the Mona Lisa. And therein is the problem, is that there is a vintage legitimacy to certain things historically. And historical artifact will always be scarce. And you can produce a copy, and that's fine, but that's not the same thing. See, there's always going to be a scarcity, and a scarcity provides a certain amount of value, and that value will become a trading system. The value, even if it's baseball cards, for God's sake.
Well, see, that's where you and I differ, is I would be perfectly happy with replicated Mona Lisas and dinosaur bones made of styrofoam and paper mache.
You would, and most people would not. And therein is the problem. That's the difference between you and everyone else. As you don't mind fake crap.
I'm not a crazy person. All right. Well, we want to know what you think. Email us at reason@wnyatheist.org. Okay, so we're coming to the bottom of another episode of Reason Podcast. Mm-hmm. Next week we have another very, very special show with, we're going to have on David McAfee.
David McAfee of, well, he's actually written quite a few books. His most recent is Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist, A Guide to Coming Out.
Yes. We're a skeptical podcast. We're not atheists. And if you have any questions on that, you can email us at reason@wnyatheist.org.
Yes. It's thinly veiled. No one will see through your clever ruse.
No. It's all about being, skeptical, not, making declarative statements like, I believe the devil is the king of France, or something. Yes. I think that's what they think we believe, or something like that.
I'm reasonably certain they do. I think you are correct.
The devil is the king of France.
Mm-hmm.
Dulang. All right. Thanks for staying with us to the bottom of another episode of Reason. We will see you next week. Farewell.
Ciao.
Purkinje Fibers.